The 7-year-old in the pink jacket stepped off the curb at 7:41 in the evening, her small patent leather shoes sliding on wet asphalt still glistening from the October rain that had fallen 3 hours earlier. Hanover Street roared with rush-hour traffic, and Emma Calabrese did not see the delivery truck accelerating toward her, its driver texting, his eyes nowhere near the road. The headlights bore down on her small frame like a predator closing in, and she froze the way children do when terror paralyzes them. Mia Voss was walking past. She had just finished her shift at the Meridian Hotel, her feet screaming inside shoes held together with athletic tape, her stomach empty because Douglas Hale had forced her to work for hours of unpaid overtime and she could not afford to eat today. She was thinking about the $5 bill in her pocket, the only money separating her from nothing, when she looked up and saw the child. She didn't think. Thinking takes time. Thinking takes the luxury of hesitation. Mia moved like a blade. She crossed the sidewalk in 3 strides, her tired legs finding speed she did not know she possessed, and she grabbed Emma's small shoulders and yanked her backward with everything her exhausted body could summon. The delivery truck's horn screamed, a sound like something dying, and the brakes shrieked against the asphalt 3 feet from where Emma's shoes had been. The smell of burned rubber filled the air, acrid and chemical, burning the back of Mia's throat. Emma's body went rigid against hers, and the child's breathing came in terrified gasps that sounded like hiccups, like drowning on land. The truck skidded to a halt. The driver's face went white. Horns blared from the cars behind him, drivers leaning on their horns without knowing what had almost happened, their anger meaningless against the weight of what had just been prevented. Mia's hands would not stop shaking. She pulled Emma into the shelter of the storefront, away from the street, away from the metal and the speed and the casual death that lived in traffic. She knelt down to meet the child's eyes. Emma's irises were dilated, her mouth open, unable to make sound, unable to do anything but stare. "Sweetheart, where are your parents?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling like a candle in the wind. Emma could not speak. She pointed instead. Her small arm stretched toward the street, toward a black SUV parked across Hanover, its windows tinted so dark you could not see inside. 2 men in charcoal suits stood rigid beside the vehicle, their faces locked in an expression Mia would never forget, the expression of men watching the world stop. Mia stood. Emma's hand found hers. It was small and cold and still trembling. Mia could feel the child's pulse in her palm, racing like an animal in a cage. She walked Emma across the street, each step deliberate, each breath an effort, her own heart refusing to slow down. The 2 men moved toward them. The one on the left was tall and broad-shouldered, his suit tailored so precisely it must have cost more than 6 months of Mia's rent. His hair was dark, slicked back, and his eyes were the color of a winter sky. The second man was shorter, muscle-heavy, with a scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw like something carved in stone. "Emma." The taller man breathed her name like a prayer. He dropped to one knee in his expensive suit, and Mia saw his hands moving over the child's body, checking, searching, making sure she was intact. His hands were shaking. That detail struck Mia as strange, that such a powerfully built man could have hands that shook. She stepped into traffic, Mia said quietly. Her voice sounded small even to herself. A truck was coming. "She's okay. She's fine." The man looked up at Mia, and something shifted in his expression, a calculation happening behind his eyes. He stood to his full height, he was easily 6'2", maybe 6'3", and he studied her face like he was memorizing it. "Thank you," he said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath, like something carved in granite. "What is your name?" "Mia." "Mia Voss." She didn't know why she answered. She didn't know why she was still standing there. "You saved my daughter's life." He said it like a statement of fact, like something written in stone. Anyone would have. "No." He cut her off. His eyes were dark and piercing, and they held hers with a pressure that made it difficult to breathe. "Not everyone. Not most people. You." The scarred man stepped forward. "Boss, we should." "I know, Tony." The tall man placed his hand on Emma's head, and the gesture was so gentle it seemed impossible coming from someone who moved with such controlled violence. "Emma, I need you to go inside with Franco. He is going to take you home. Your mother is waiting." Emma did not move. She looked up at Mia, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, that they had both nearly lost something tonight, though they could not have explained what. "Will she come?" Emma asked. "No, sweetheart. But she knows you are safe now. That is all that matters." The scarred man, Franco, extended his hand to Emma, and the child released Mia's grip and took it. They walked to the SUV. Franco opened the rear door, and Emma climbed inside. Mia watched through the tinted window as the child looked back at her one final time before Franco closed the door. The tall man remained. He was still studying her face, and Mia felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing, like pressure against her skin. "You have nothing?" he asked suddenly. Mia did not understand the question. "I'm sorry. Your shoes are held together with tape. Your coat is too thin for October. You are counting something, money, perhaps, in your pocket right now. 3 times you have calculated in the last 30 seconds. So I ask again. You have nothing?" Mia's face flushed. She pulled her hand from her pocket. "I have $5. That's enough." He looked at the $5 bill in her palm, and she watched his expression shift into something she could not name. The black SUV's engine started behind him. "That is not enough," he said quietly. "Not for a woman who runs into traffic to save a child that is not hers." Tony opened the driver's side door. The tall man did not move. "Will you tell me your address?" he asked. "No." The word came out before Mia could think about whether it was wise. "I appreciate your gratitude, but I don't need. I am not offering you charity." His voice was ice wrapped around steel. "You have saved something irreplaceable. In my world, that creates a debt. In my world, debts are paid. Whether you cooperate or not, I will find you." Mia's breath caught. She should have been afraid. Later, she would wonder why she was not. "Why?" she asked. "Because," he said, "people who save others without expecting reward are rare. And rare things do not remain unguarded in my world." He turned and walked to the SUV. He did not wait for an answer. Tony held the door open, and the tall man climbed inside. The window was tinted so dark that Mia could not see inside as the vehicle pulled into traffic and disappeared into the lights and movement of Hanover Street. Mia stood alone on the sidewalk, the $5 bill still clutched in her trembling hand, the smell of burned rubber still hanging in the air. A stranger in a tailored suit had looked at her like she mattered. A child had pointed at a black SUV and said those men belonged to someone. A voice like thunder had promised that a debt would be paid. She did not know that the man she had just handed her entire life over to, without even realizing it, was Nicholas Calabrese. She did not know that in Boston's underworld, his name was whispered like a curse word, like something that could make grown men disappear. She did not know that for the first time in his adult life, he had knelt down in public, his control shattered by a moment of terror, his empire of violence rendered meaningless by the thought of losing a 7-year-old girl. But what she did not know was far more important than what she did. Nicholas Calabrese never forgot a debt. And he had just watched a stranger, a woman with $5 in her pocket and nothing else in the world, save the only thing he would ever love. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. Now let us go back to the beginning, to 43 days earlier, when Mia Voss lost everything and discovered that rock bottom has a basement. The car she lived in was a 2009 Honda Civic, faded gray, with a crack in the rear window that she had covered with duct tape. It was parked in the lot behind the all-night laundromat on Dorchester Avenue, where she had paid $50 a month to the owner to leave it there, to sleep there, to exist there in the darkness without being removed as a vagrant. 43 days ago, that $50 had been a negotiation she could afford. Now she was not sure she could afford it for another month. Mia sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, Gasoline cost money, and money was something she no longer had in quantities that permitted running the engine just to stay warm. It was 4 in the morning, that hour when darkness is so complete it feels like the world has ended. She wore 3 sweaters and a blanket from the shelter, pulled around her shoulders like a shawl. Her breath came in small white clouds. On the dashboard in front of her lay the pieces of her catastrophe, a foreclosure notice printed in official red and black, a hospital bill from 5 years ago that had never stopped accumulating interest, and a photograph of a building that had been her entire life's purpose. The Riverside Shelter for Children had housed 37 children on the night she received the foreclosure notice. 37 kids ranging in age from 4 to 17, most of them with nowhere else to go, most of them with parents who were dead or missing or addicted or simply incapable of love. Mia had volunteered there for 8 years, working without pay because the shelter itself had no money to pay her. She had slept on a cot in the basement, used the facility's shower, eaten the same meager meals the children ate. She had braided hair and bandaged scrapes and listened to stories that would break the heart of anyone still capable of being broken. The notice said $35,000 in 14 days or the building would be seized and the children would be dispersed into the state system, scattered like seeds in a storm. $35,000. The number was so vast, so impossible, that it might as well have been 35 million. To Mia, both were equally unachievable. She had spent 8 years giving everything she had to those children, and she had nothing to show for it. No savings. No education. No family. No reserves. Just the $5 bill in her pocket and the clothes on her back and the growing understanding that she was going to watch those children be taken away, and there was nothing on earth she could do to stop it. That morning, the morning the notice arrived, she had walked to the Meridian Hotel and told Douglas Hale, the manager, that she needed a second job. She needed money urgently. She could work doubles, triples, anything. The smile he gave her was not a kind one. Douglas Hale was 47 years old and carried his cruelty with the ease of a man who had never faced consequence. He was thin in the way that suggested eating was something he did between more important activities. His hair was slicked back with product, and his eyes were a pale blue that reminded Mia of ice, cold, reflective, incapable of warmth. He wore a diamond ring on his left pinky finger, though he had never been married, and the ring caught the light whenever he pointed at someone in anger. "You need money," he had said, and his smile widened. "Everyone needs money, Voss. Most people don't get it just for asking nicely." But he had given her the double shifts. For hours in the morning cleaning rooms, 8 hours in the evening working the front desk and the restaurant floor, no breaks, no meals, no possibility of rest. And every night, he had found reasons to prevent her from leaving on time. A guest needed something at 11 p.m. A spill needed cleaning at midnight. A reservation needed adjusting at 1 in the morning. For the past 43 days, Mia had worked 72 hours a week and made enough to afford gasoline and the occasional hamburger and the $50 parking fee. She had not paid rent because she had no rent to pay. She had not bought clothes because the 3 sweaters would have to last. She had not allowed herself to hope because hope was a luxury for people with futures. The Meridian Hotel was where the wealthy people of Boston came to conduct their lives. Executives, politicians, visiting celebrities, people whose casual spending in a single evening equaled her annual survival costs. They arrived in cars that cost more than she would earn in a lifetime. They demanded rooms on the highest floors. They tipped generously when they noticed you, and they treated you like furniture when they did not. Mia worked the night shift now because Douglas had scheduled her that way, because night shift meant fewer supervisors, fewer witnesses, fewer reasons not to bend the rules. And bending rules was something Douglas Hale had perfected over 20 years of management. "You're pretty," he had said to her 3 weeks into the double shifts. The guests notice. The male guests especially. You should lean into that. Smile more. Wear your uniform tighter. That's money in your pocket if you play it right. She had not responded. She had learned long ago that responding to men like Douglas Hale only escalated their interest. "I have tips for you," he said another night, cornering her in the laundry room. "Ways to make real money. Guests in the penthouse suites, they pay for company. Discretion. You understand. I'm not interested. You're living in a car. His voice was flat, conversational. Your charity case shelter is about to be demolished. You have nothing. But you're walking around like you're too good for actual money. That's stupid, Voss. She had walked away. She had always walked away. But he had filed away her silence like a weapon, like something he would use later when the moment was right. And the moment was coming. The photograph on her dashboard showed the riverside shelter in morning light, the brick facade painted with a mural the children had made 3 years ago. Stars and moons and the words "Hope lives here" in letters so bright they almost hurt to look at. $35,000. Mia closed her eyes and tried to calculate it one more time, as if the math might somehow change. Minimum wage was $15 an hour. 72 hours a week meant she was making roughly $1,080 a week before taxes. Taxes took 30%. That left $756 a week. 35,000 divided by 756 was 46 weeks of perfect earnings with no absences, no sick days, no expenses for anything beyond survival. She had 14 days. The mathematics of desperation are always impossible. A sound drew her attention, a car pulling into the laundromat lot. Headlights swept across her windshield, bright and intrusive. She stayed still, invisible. The car parked 3 spots away. A woman got out, carrying a laundry basket. Normal. Safe. The kind of person Mia used to be, before the foreclosure notice, before Douglas Hale, before the world had contracted into this Honda Civic and these sweaters and these calculations that never added up to anything but defeat. She picked up the photograph of the shelter. The children had written their names on the back in marker: Emma age 4, Marcus age 12, Sophia age 7. 37 names in total, written in handwriting that ranged from careful to chaotic to barely legible. These were not abstract children. They were specific people with specific names and specific dreams that the world was going to crush very soon. Mia had saved for $5. That was what she had to show for 43 days of terror and exhaustion and mathematical impossibility. She did not know that in 3 hours and 40 minutes she would pull into traffic to buy coffee she could not afford. She did not know that on Hanover Street at 7:41 in the evening, a 7-year-old girl would step off a curb. She did not know that saving someone else's child would change the trajectory of her own survival. But the storm was already forming on the horizon, moving toward her with the weight of fate, and what happened next would tear her entire world open and rebuild it into something neither she nor anyone watching could have predicted. The thunder was coming. The rain would follow. And in the darkness, a debt was about to be born. The October wind cuts through Boston like a blade wrapped in ice, and at 5:47 in the morning, Mia Voss stands in the fluorescent wasteland of a Murphy's gas station bathroom, washing her face with hand soap that smells like chemicals and broken promises. The water runs cold. She scrubs her cheeks, her neck, her collarbones visible beneath a tank top she has worn 4 days in a row. The mirror is spotted with grime that no amount of cleaning will remove. She looks away. Her reflection has become something she cannot afford to study too closely. She presses paper towels against her wet face, and they disintegrate into pulp in her hands. This is how it is now. Everything falls apart when you touch it. Her backpack sits on the toilet tank, a canvas thing from 2015 that was once blue and is now the color of old concrete. Inside, 2 Meridian Hotel uniforms, both black, both fitted at the waist, both bearing the small embroidered logo near the pocket that marks her as service staff. Neither uniform has been washed in 3 days. Beneath the uniforms, wrapped carefully in newspaper like something precious, sits a pair of red children's shoes. Size 5. They belonged to Marcus when he was 4. Now Marcus is 12, and these shoes are the only thing of his that Mia could save when she left the shelter to find better work that would let her help them more. The shoes weigh almost nothing, and that is the problem. That is always the problem. The things that matter most weigh almost nothing at all. She changes in the bathroom stall, pulling the uniform over her head, buttoning it down the front, checking the pocket for her ID badge, her hands moving through the routine with the kind of precision that comes from repetition. 184 days of this. Or was it 185? The numbers blur together like wet watercolors. She brushes her teeth at the chipped sink, and outside the bathroom door a trucker pounds twice, hard. The sound is violent. She spits the water, rinses, exits. The trucker is waiting with his arms crossed, breathing like an engine at idle. She does not meet his eyes. She has learned that meeting eyes costs time, and she has none to spare. The drive to the Meridian Hotel takes 17 minutes through early morning traffic. The sky is still dark, the color of old bruises. She parks in the employee lot, where her Honda Civic sits among the luxury vehicles, black Mercedes, silver BMWs, a Range Rover that costs more than she will earn in 30 years. The parking lot is a landscape of contrast, and Mia is a stain on it, a piece of evidence that the world contains people who do not belong in spaces this expensive. She collects her badge and her phone and climbs the service stairs at the back of the hotel, the ones that bypass the gleaming lobby, the ones that smell like bleach and basement. The break room is empty at 6:12 in the morning except for Douglas Hale, who stands at the counter counting money with the deliberation of a man who has never had to question whether he would eat that night. Hale is 38 years old but moves through the world like a man who was born at 50. His dark hair is slicked back with pomade that catches the fluorescent light. His tie is the color of old coffee, stained in 3 places with spots that never came out. He is the day manager of the Meridian Hotel, and he has the kind of power that comes from controlling things that belong to other people. Mia enters quietly. Hale does not look up. "Morning, Hale," she says, and her voice is barely a whisper, like she is afraid that volume itself might disturb him. He holds up one finger without glancing at her. "Wait." She waits. He counts another stack of bills, sets it down, turns to face her. His smile is the kind that happens on a face that has just decided to be cruel. "These your tips from yesterday?" He holds up the envelope. "Yes." She reaches for it, but he pulls it back. The gesture is quick, practiced, rehearsed. "I counted $73 here. That seems high for a Tuesday night. These people usually tip less on Tuesdays." He opens the envelope and begins removing bills one by one, setting them on the counter. "Let's call it 60. 38% of your earnings goes to the hotel, that's in your contract, which you signed." "Right." She had not signed that. She had signed something, but that was not what it said. She knows this. She does not argue. "That's $13. Leaves $55 for you. But you know what? The hotel's been slow. The owners asked me to reduce all tips by 15% as a temporary measure to fund maintenance. So let's call it 47. You okay with that?" The mathematics are simple. She knows exactly what is happening. But a job that pays $430 a week is the difference between life and the kind of death that happens slowly, in a car, in a parking lot behind a warehouse. "I need the money," she says. Her hands are trembling. "Then you work the double tonight. No overtime. That way you stay competitive with the earnings. I was already scheduled until 11. Now you're scheduled until 2. Housekeeping called in sick. You'll cover." He slides the $47 across the counter. "You want to keep this job, right?" She wants to keep this job the way a drowning person wants to stay above water. She says yes. By noon, after she has cleaned 14 rooms and changed 42 sheets and scrubbed soap scum from 7 shower doors, her hands are raw and her shoulders ache in a way that suggests the muscle itself is considering giving up. Room for 12 requires her attention. A businessman, 54 years old, wearing a tie that probably cost more than her car payment, is lying on his bed, reading a newspaper. He does not acknowledge her when she enters. She moves to the towel rack, where the old towels hang like surrendered flags. She removes them quietly. He sits up. She feels the shift in the room like a change in pressure. You can hang the clean towels here, she says, pointing. She is careful to keep her voice level. He stands. He is broad, thick with the kind of weight that comes from eating very well. He walks toward her. His hand comes down on her lower back, sliding across the fabric of her uniform with a kind of casual ownership, like she is furniture in a room he has rented. She freezes. Her body goes rigid like a deer that has heard the safety click of a rifle. He smiles. The smile says he knows she will not report him, that she cannot afford to, that the mathematics of her survival require her to absorb this small violation as payment for the privilege of earning $47. From the hallway, Douglas Hale watches. He does not intervene. The shift ends at 11 o'clock in the evening, and Mia sits at the desk with Hale's hand holding a clock-out sheet. She has earned $238 in 10 hours, and none of it is overtime. That is a rate of $23.80 per hour. The federal minimum is $7.25. The difference between what she is owed and what she receives is enough to make her feel like stealing, except she is the one being stolen from. You'll cover housekeeping tonight, Hale says, and it is not a question. Starts at 11:30. Goes until 2. You'll strip beds in the West Wing and replace the linens. Probably 30 rooms. Should take about 3 hours if you move fast. I wasn't scheduled for housekeeping. You are now. He returns to his desk. Their conversation is over. At 2:15 in the morning, with her hands bleeding from small cuts where the corners of the fitted sheets have torn into her skin, Mia walks through the October darkness to her car. The wind is brutal. It tears through the parking lot like something alive and angry, and she pulls her thin jacket tighter around herself, which makes almost no difference. Her fingers are numb. Her legs are numb. There is a part of her that is becoming numb to everything except the exact mathematics of her survival. She sits in the driver's seat with the car running, and the heat slowly begins to emerge from the vents. She rests her forehead on the steering wheel. She thinks about the shelter. She thinks about the foreclosure notice that arrived 3 weeks ago, the one that sits on her passenger seat in a manila envelope, the one that says $35,000 in 14 days. She has $90 in her checking account and $47 in her pocket. The deadline is in 9 days. The mathematics are not impossible, they are beyond impossible. They have moved past the realm of numbers into the realm of prayer, and Mia stopped praying a long time ago. Something breaks inside her. It is not dramatic. There is no sound. There is only the sudden understanding that the world does not contain a solution to this equation, that there are 37 children sleeping in beds that will soon become rubble, that all her work and all her suffering and all the small humiliation she absorbs daily amount to nothing but a postponement of inevitable devastation. She rests her head on the steering wheel, and the tears come. They come the way rain comes when the sky has held too much for too long, not gently, but with the weight of everything that has been compressed into clouds finally releasing all at once. She cries for the shelter. She cries for Marcus and his missing shoes. She cries for Emma, who is 4 years old and draws pictures of sunflowers on the walls of the shelter's common room, sunflowers in colors that do not exist in nature because Emma's understanding of the world is still beautiful and unbroken. She cries for herself, though that is the part that feels most selfish. She cries until there are no tears left, until her body is just making the motion of grief without any liquid to show for it. At 2:41 in the morning, sitting in a 2009 Honda Civic that smells like stale coffee and desperation, Mia Voss does not know that in exactly 3 hours, she will pull into traffic on Hanover Street. She does not know that a 7-year-old girl named Emma will step off a curb without looking. She does not know that the reflex that will save that child's life, the same reflex that has saved nothing in her own life, will change everything. But the storm is moving toward her. It is only minutes away. The fluorescent lights hummed above Sal's diner like a dying animal, casting everything in sickly white that made the checkered black and white floor look like a chessboard where all the pieces had already been swept away. Mia Voss sat in the corner booth at 3:22 in the morning, her forehead resting against the cold window, watching her own reflection blur and sharpen with the October wind that rattled the glass like something desperate to break in. Her hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee she could barely afford, steam rising in ghostly spirals that disappeared before they could become anything real. Outside, dead leaves skittered across the empty parking lot like small animals fleeing something they could not name. Gloria, the night waitress with silver streaking her black hair, had not asked questions when Mia ordered. She had simply poured the coffee, left the check face down on the table, and returned to wiping the counter with mechanical precision. In 43 days of living in her car, Mia had learned that the kindest people were those who allowed you to suffer in silence. She pulled the crumpled foreclosure notice from her jacket pocket with trembling fingers. $35,000. The shelter's building, the place where she had spent her childhood locked away from the world's cruelty, was being seized by a bank that had never heard of Marcus and his missing shoes, or Emma who drew sunflowers in colors that should not exist, or the 37 other children who fell asleep each night in beds that would soon become rubble. 9 days remained. 9 days and then the doors would close forever. Mia counted the bills in her other pocket. 5 crumpled dollars. This was everything. Not enough for a week's rent. Not enough for food. Not enough for anything except the crushing mathematics of her own powerlessness. She withdrew something else from her backpack, a pair of tiny white sneakers with Velcro straps, so small they fit in the palm of her hand. A boy named James had worn them 3 years ago before the adoption came through. She had kept them because they were proof that sometimes children escaped. Sometimes the ending was not always the same ending. Across Beacon Street, beyond the neon glow of the diner's windows, 3 men in suits that cost more than her monthly rent stood motionless in the darkness. Nicholas Calabrese was 6'2" with dark hair graying at the temples and a scar that ran from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone like a blade had once tried to split his face in two. He wore a black cashmere coat, a gold watch that caught the streetlight, and an expression that had not changed in the 7 minutes he had been watching the woman in the diner count $5. Tony, his closest lieutenant, shifted his weight. "Why are we here, boss?" Nicholas did not respond. His eyes remained fixed on Mia's reflection in the window, on the way her shoulders curved inward as if she could make herself small enough to disappear entirely. Franco, lean and scarred along his jaw, said quietly, "She looks like she is carrying the weight of the world." "She is," Nicholas said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath carved into stone. "But she does not know that I am going to remove it." The next morning arrived grey and hostile. Rain began falling at 6 in the morning, the kind of rain that came sideways and seemed to carry punishment in every drop. Mia pulled into the service entrance of the Meridian Hotel at 6:03, her clothes already soaked through, her teeth chattering as she clocked in for what would become a 14-hour shift. Douglas Hale was waiting in the break room. He was 51 years old, shaped like a man who had once been muscular and allowed discipline to slide into softness. His manager's tie was already loosened, his breath sour with coffee and something darker. He stood with his arms crossed. "Rachel Dawson is coming today for an inspection," he said without preamble. 2 o'clock. 8th and 9th floors. Mia's chest tightened. Everyone who worked at the Meridian knew about Rachel Dawson. She owned 4 luxury hotels in Boston, wore diamond rings worth more than Mia would earn in 5 years, and had a reputation for entering hotels like a plague, departing like a ruin. Staff members had been terminated for infractions so minor they barely qualified as mistakes. "If you embarrass me in front of her," Hale said, stepping closer until she could smell the coffee on his breath, "you are done. Do you understand?" Mia nodded. At 11 o'clock, Rachel Dawson entered the lobby like a blade wrapped in ice. She was 43, blonde with the kind of surgical perfection that required monthly maintenance, wearing a white pantsuit and heels that clicked against the marble with the precision of a metronome. Everything about her was sharp. Her jawline. Her eyes. The way she smiled without any warmth reaching the muscles around her mouth. Hale trailed behind her like a dog waiting for approval. On the 8th floor, Mia was changing linens in one of the suites when Rachel appeared in the doorway. She watched silently while Mia worked, then walked to the window and ran her finger along the sill. She held up her hand, and dust particles caught the light. "Unacceptable," Rachel said. Her voice was like honey poured over broken glass. "You clearly do not care about standards here." "I'm sorry," Mia whispered. "I'll clean it again right now." Rachel turned slowly to face her. "What is your name?" "Mia. Mia Voss." "I will remember that." Rachel walked closer, circling Mia the way a predator circles prey. "How long have you worked here?" 3 months. "I have been watching you. Guests ask for you by name. They specifically request you." Rachel's smile widened. "That kind of attention makes other employees jealous. It makes me wonder what you are doing to earn it. What special services you are providing in the rooms after you close the door." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Mia's face burned red. "I only do my job," Mia said quietly. "Of course you do." Rachel left without another word. Hale followed, his face unreadable. At 4 in the afternoon, a black town car pulled to the service entrance. 2 men in tailored suits entered, their movements fluid and purposeful. Tony and Franco. They asked the desk clerk for Mia Voss. When Mia came down, Tony spoke with the politeness of someone who was not accustomed to being refused. "Mr. Calabrese would like to speak with you. The little girl you saved on Hanover Street. Her father wanted to thank you properly." "That's not necessary," Mia said, her pulse quickening. "I'm just glad she's okay." "He insists," Franco said. "Tomorrow evening. 7 o'clock. He handed her a card with an address in the North End. His eyes were kind, which somehow made everything more frightening. Hale watched from the office, his jaw clenched, his fingers gripping the edge of his desk until his knuckles went white. The next evening, Mia took the bus to Donatello's, a restaurant tucked into a brick building where the windows were blackened glass and no strangers walked through the front door. Tony met her and led her upstairs to a private room where Emma sat at a table coloring in a book, her small tongue poking out with concentration. Nicholas Calabrese stood when she entered. He was exactly as beautiful and terrifying as she remembered from that night on Hanover Street. The scar through his eyebrow. The way his entire body seemed to contain controlled violence the way a lightning rod contains electricity. But when Emma looked up and said, "You're the lady who grabbed me. You're really fast," something shifted in his expression. "Thank you for what you did for my daughter," Nicholas said. His voice was quiet. It was the voice of someone unused to expressing gratitude, which made the words carry enormous weight. "Anyone would have done the same," Mia said. "But you did it." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please." "She Saturday." Emma returned to her coloring. The silence that followed was not hostile, it was something else. Something that felt like a question being asked without words. "What can I do to repay you?" Nicholas asked finally. Mia opened her mouth to say nothing, truly, but the exhaustion of 43 days of living in her car, of eating leftovers from hotel garbage, of watching children lose their future, broke something open inside her. "The shelter I volunteer at," she said. "The place that saved my life when I was small. It's being foreclosed. $35,000 needed in 9 days or 37 children lose their beds." Nicholas listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked one question. "Why does this matter to you?" Mia looked at Emma, still coloring, her small hand steady and certain. "Because I grew up in a place like that. It saved my life. I won't let it close." Nicholas nodded slowly. "Consider it handled. The shelter will have the money by Friday." Mia's eyes flooded. "Why would you help me? I am nobody." Nicholas leaned forward until she could see the depth of the scar on his face, could see that it was old, that he had been wounded long ago and had simply learned to live with it. "You saved my daughter's life," he said. "You think I would let you suffer after that?" "No. I have been given a second chance because of you. That is a debt I will spend my life repaying." His men exchanged glances they had not exchanged in 15 years. What changed everything was happening in the darkness outside. Douglas Hale stood across the street in the rain, his phone's camera raised, taking photographs of Mia through the restaurant window. His hands shook as he worked. She had just attracted the attention of the most dangerous man in Boston, and he knew with perfect certainty that her life, his entire operation at the hotel, was about to collapse under the weight of it. In his pocket, Rachel Dawson's business card held her cell phone number, and he was already composing the text that would set everything in motion. I have information about the new girl. Call me. The rain fell harder, and somewhere in the city, a storm was gathering that would tear through everything they believed was solid. The waterfront bench held the shape of her body like a curse that could not be erased. Mia Voss sat motionless at 4:37 in the afternoon, her $5 bills crumpled in one fist, the other hand gripping a pair of small pink shoes that smelled like the shelter, like the children who had worn them before Emma, like every dream she had ever tried to protect. The sky above Boston Harbor hung gray and low, pressing down like the lid of a coffin being sealed. She had walked out of the Meridian Hotel 12 minutes ago. Not fired. Destroyed. Rachel Dawson's corner office on the 32nd floor had felt like a courtroom where the verdict was already written before she arrived. Glass desk. Harbor view that cost more than Mia's entire life. A woman in a navy suit from Human Resources sitting silent in the corner, bearing witness. Rachel Dawson had not raised her voice. That was what made it worse. Douglas Hale saw everything, Rachel had said, her manicured fingers folded on the desk like a prayer that would never be answered. He documented your behavior with photographs. You meeting with men in suits. Taking payments. It's all very clear to me what you are. Mia had tried to speak. That's not what. I have 4 other employees who will corroborate his story, Rachel continued. When I present this to the police, along with our security footage, your credibility will be shattered. You are nobody, Mia. You have nothing. Who do you think they will believe? A decorated hotel manager or a woman living in a car? The words had landed like stones. One after another. Settling into her chest. Security had walked her to the elevator. No goodbyes from the housekeeping staff who knew her? No chance to collect the tips from her apron pocket, the $17 she had been counting on for gas money. Nothing. Just the elevator descending, 32 floors of silence, and then the lobby, the revolving door, the October wind hitting her face like a blade wrapped in ice. Now the shoe sat in her lap. The first pair Emma had worn to the shelter 3 years ago, donated by a church, too small but Emma had grown into them. Mia had kept them when Emma outgrew them because it felt like keeping something true in a world that kept lying. She pressed the small heel against her chest and felt her heart hammering beneath it, fast and panicked like a cornered animal. The voice inside her head was winning. The voice that sounded like every person who had ever said no to her, every landlord, every supervisor, every man who had told her she was too much trouble. You should have known better. You should have stayed invisible. People like you don't get saved. People like you don't matter. You brought this on yourself. She thought about the car. The old Hyundai parked 3 blocks away, half a tank of gas if she was lucky. She could drive until it ran out. The New Hampshire border. The Vermont mountains. Just keep going until the world forgot her name, and the world would forget her name because she had never mattered enough to remember in the first place. A child's laugh cut through the noise in her head. She looked up. A boy, maybe 6 years old, running ahead of his parents on the boardwalk, his face bright with the pure joy of movement, of being alive, of not understanding yet that the world was designed to crush people like him if he wasn't born to the right family, the right money, the right nothing. She watched him run. She watched his mother catch up to him, laughing, wrapping her arms around him. She watched the father put his hand on the boy's shoulder with the casual confidence of a man who had never doubted that his child would be safe, would be fed, would be loved. Mia's hand stopped shaking. She put Emma's shoes back in her backpack with the same care someone would use handling glass. She stood up. The wind cut through her sweater, through the thin jacket that wasn't warm enough, but she felt the cold as if it belonged to someone else. She stood on the waterfront at the edge of the city and she did not know what came next. She did not know how she would pay for gas. She did not know where she would sleep. She did not know if anyone in this city would ever believe the truth now that Rachel Dawson had written the story the way she wanted it written. But she would not disappear. At that exact moment, in an office on Hanover Street, Nicholas Calabrese was pouring 4 fingers of whiskey into a crystal glass when his phone rang. It was Tony. His voice came through tight and careful, the way it sounded when he was delivering bad news in a place where bad news could get you killed. "The woman was fired today," Tony said. "I got confirmation from someone in the building. The hotel manager, Douglas Hale, and the owner, Rachel Dawson, they filed an HR complaint. Accusations of inappropriate conduct with guests, soliciting money, bringing disrepute to the hotel. They had her escorted out at 4:30 this afternoon." The glass froze at Nicholas's lips. 60 seconds of silence. The kind of silence that made men nervous even though they had nothing to do with causing it. "Everything," Nicholas said, and his voice was like stone sinking through water. "Find everything about Douglas Hale and Rachel Dawson. Every transaction. Every threat. Every guest they hurt. Every employee. Every call. Every photograph on that man's phone. I want to know the color of his daughter's school backpack. I want to know if Rachel Dawson takes her coffee black or with cream. 48 hours, Tony. Not 49. "Yes," Tony said. "I'll get started right now." The line went dead. Nicholas set the whiskey on his desk without drinking it. Through the window of his office, he could see the harbor, the same water Mia was watching 30 blocks away. He could see the buildings that housed his businesses, the legitimate ones and the ones that kept careful books with 2 sets of numbers. He could see the city that answered to him, that bent itself around the shape of his will the way water bends around stone. But somewhere in that city, a woman with nothing was sitting on a bench deciding whether to disappear. 48 hours later, the morning moved like a military operation. At 5:58 in the morning, black SUVs pulled up to the Meridian Hotel. 12 men in dark suits moved like ghosts, their credentials in red plastic holders, their weapons visible but not drawn. FBI on their jackets, though the real work was being done by people whose names were not on any badge. Federal warrants in every pocket. Court orders. 30 years of gathered evidence suddenly accelerated, suddenly prioritized, suddenly coordinated with the precision of something that had been waiting a very long time for permission to move. Douglas Hale was eating a bagel in the break room on the employee level when they found him. His phone was on the counter beside him, next to the photographs he had printed out, the ones he had planned to send to Rachel Dawson that afternoon, the ones that would cement his leverage over the woman who had promised him a promotion if he would only get rid of the problem girl. The lead agent was a woman with gray eyes and a voice that did not invite negotiation. "Douglas Hale, we have a federal warrant for your arrest. Embezzlement of employee wages across 6 years. Extortion. Sexual harassment. Intimidation of 4 separate witnesses who have filed complaints against you." Hale's face went the color of the tile floor beneath his feet. "This is a mistake. You don't understand. She made me. That girl, Mia, she." "You have the right to remain silent," the agent said, and there was no patience in her voice, no room for negotiation or excuse. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." His hands were zip-tied behind his back in less than 10 seconds. He tried to stand. His legs would not hold him. They carried him through the hotel's main lobby while staff froze in place, while cameras mounted in corners recorded everything, while his voice broke into sounds that were not quite words anymore. "It wasn't me. It wasn't me. She made me." Nobody was listening. At the same hour, on the 32nd floor of the corporate tower, FBI agents were presenting Rachel Dawson with evidence that had been gathering for 18 months. Tax fraud across 4 hotel properties. Labor violations. Falsified records. Payroll manipulation. A whole empire built on the back of systematic deception and the absolute certainty that people like her were not accountable to people like everyone else. Rachel's lawyer was on the phone, but it was too late for the phone to matter. The agents walked her out at 6:43 in the morning in handcuffs that looked absurd against her $5,000 Rolex, her tailored charcoal suit, her perfectly blown-out hair. Photographers were waiting on the street. They always were. Someone had called them. The story was already written before the sun cleared the buildings. Her face twisted in rage and humiliation as the cameras flashed. 20 years of carefully constructed social positioning destroyed in real time on the morning news. 40 years minimum federal prison. Forfeiture of assets. The dissolution of everything she believed she was. Nicholas watched both broadcasts from his office without moving. His face was absolutely still, the kind of still that meant his brain was working through calculations that required perfect silence. 40 years minimum, Tony said quietly. Both of them looking at federal time. Good, Nicholas said. Prison is too quick. Too easy. Too merciful. This way they lose everything slowly. They lose their names. They lose their freedom. They lose the thing that mattered most to them, their belief that they were untouchable. Prison is just the punctuation mark at the end of a sentence that takes years to write. Franco spoke from near the door. What about the girl? Mia? Nicholas set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. Make sure she knows. But do not tell her it was us. She needs to know that the truth came out. That Hale and Dawson were arrested. That she was right. That the world saw what they did. But the how of it, that remains ours. She can carry that truth alone. And if she asks? Tony said. Nicholas looked at him for a long moment. She will not ask. She is stronger than that. And if she does ask, tell her that sometimes the people we save refuse to be invisible, and sometimes that refusal makes a sound so loud that it wakes up everyone listening. The studio apartment in Dorchester smelled like fresh paint and possibility. Mia stood in the center of the empty room, holding a single key that belonged to no one but her, and for the first time in 44 days, she was not sleeping in her car. The mattress lay on the hardwood floor like a promise. One lamp cast warm light across the bare walls. On the window sill, she placed the child's first pair of shoes, tiny pink sneakers with white socks still folded inside, the ones Emma had worn the day Mia pulled her from traffic on Hanover Street. The shoes stayed there. A permanent reminder. She sat on the mattress and the crying came like a dam breaking, like her body could finally release the weight it had been carrying since the foreclosure notice arrived. These were not tears of despair. These were tears of survival. Of making it through. Of still being alive when the odds said she should not be. 3 months passed. The seasons began their turn toward winter. Mia accepted a position at the non-profit, managing donor relations, which meant she spent her days calling people with money and asking them to care about children with nothing. She was exceptional at it. She knew the language of desperation because she had spoken it her entire body. She knew the weight of being overlooked because she had been invisible for so long. The shelter's director, a woman named Patricia with kind eyes and graying hair, noticed immediately. You have something the other staff members don't, Patricia told her during her 3-month review. You understand what it means to be on the edge. People respond to that authenticity. By month 6, Mia was promoted to Director of Development. By month 9, she had secured grants that tripled the shelter's budget. The beds remained full. The children had warmth. The light stayed on. 1 year passed. The seasons turned again. Spring became summer, became autumn, became winter. Mia rebuilt her life brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck, moment by moment. She moved from the studio to a 1-bedroom apartment in Cambridge with actual furniture, a couch she bought from a second-hand store, a bed frame, a kitchen table where she could sit and eat meals that she had prepared herself. She had a salary. She had health insurance. She had dignity restored like a photograph slowly developing in chemical water. But Nicholas Calabrese remained in her mind like a scar that had healed but never quite faded. She wondered if he thought about her at all. If that night in her apartment when he confessed everything meant something, or if she had been simply another debt repaid, another obligation discharged. She had not seen him since. December arrived cold and sharp. Mia stood on the balcony of her apartment, her breath forming small clouds in the darkness. The city lights of Boston spread below her like scattered diamonds. The wind cut through her coat. She was thinking about him again, which had become a dangerous habit, when she heard footsteps behind her. Not on the balcony. Inside. In her apartment. She turned. Nicholas Calabrese stood in her living room, hands deep in the pockets of a charcoal wool coat that cost more than her monthly rent. He looked different than she remembered. Older. The lines around his mouth had deepened. His eyes carried the weight of a man who had seen too much and forgiven too little. But there was something else there too. Something like exhaustion. Something like longing. "How did you get in here?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Your landlord is very accommodating," Nicholas said quietly. "I explained that I was an old friend. He seemed to understand what that meant." Mia crossed her arms. "What are you doing here?" Nicholas stepped onto the balcony, closing the glass door behind him. The December wind immediately seized his hair, pushing it back from his forehead. He did not seem to notice. "I have been carrying something for a year," he said. "A weight. I thought if I stayed away from you it would fade." It did not. It only grew heavier. Mia's heart began to pound in her chest. She did not speak. "When I saw you in that diner at 3:22 in the morning, counting $5 like it was the last thing holding you together," Nicholas continued, his voice deep and measured like a confession in a confessional booth, "I knew something. I knew you were the kind of strong that does not break. The kind of good that does not quit. And I have spent a year trying to convince myself that I do not deserve to stand near that strength. That a man like me, a man with blood on his hands and choices he cannot undo, should not be allowed to touch someone like you. Why are you telling me this?" Mia whispered. Nicholas met her eyes directly. "Because I am tired of lying to myself. Because you saved my daughter and then you saved yourself, and I watched you do it from a distance. I watched you take 6 months back pay and rent an apartment and take a job and build something real. I watched you transform from the woman who had nothing into the woman who has everything that matters. And I have never seen anything like it. I wanted to leave you alone. I believed that was the right thing to do." He stepped closer. The space between them became charged with something that had no name. "But I cannot stay away anymore," he said. "Because the storm has passed and you are far stronger than you think, and I want to be near that strength if you will let me. I want to know if what I feel is something you feel too, or if I have been carrying something one-sided for 12 months. Mia's eyes filled with tears. Her voice broke. "I thought I was nobody to you. Just a woman you helped because you had the power to help." "No." Nicholas reached for her hand. His palm was warm against her skin. "You were never nobody. You were the woman I could not stop thinking about. Every decision I made this year, I made it thinking about you. Every choice, I made it wondering what you would think of it. Whether you would see it as the right thing or another crime committed by a man who should know better." The silence stretched between them like a held breath. The city lights blurred behind Mia's tears. She could hear the traffic far below, the distant sound of a siren cutting through the December night. She could feel the cold and beneath it, the warmth of Nicholas's hand holding hers. Then she closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was not gentle. It was not careful. It was the kiss of someone who had been alone for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to be found. It was the kiss of a man who had believed himself incapable of goodness until he saw it reflected in someone else's eyes. When they pulled apart, Nicholas rested his forehead against hers. "I do not deserve this," he said. "Maybe not," Mia replied. "But you are getting it anyway." 6 months later, they sat in Sal's diner at 3 in the morning in the same corner booth where Nicholas had first watched her through the window, counting $5 like it was prayer. Emma was asleep in the booth beside them, her head resting on Mia's lap, her small body curled against the vinyl seat. The checkered floor gleamed under the neon lights. The smell of stale coffee and grease hung in the air like it always had. Everything was the same. Everything was different. Nicholas held Mia's hand across the table. Gloria, the night shift waitress, refilled their coffee and smiled with the knowing look of someone who understood that some stories demand their witnesses. "I never thought I would be back here like this," Mia said softly, glancing at Emma's sleeping face. "I never thought I would let anyone in again," Nicholas replied. "Not after what happened with my brother. Not after what loyalty cost me." Mia squeezed his hand. She knew the story now. She knew about the betrayal 5 years ago, about the choice Nicholas had to make between mercy and survival, about how his own blood had sold the family to enemies for money and power. She knew that his brother had disappeared and that Nicholas carried the weight of the decision like a stone in his chest. She knew that it had made him believe loyalty was dead, that goodness was extinct, that the world was only cruelty wearing different faces. "You gave me my life back," Mia whispered. "No," Nicholas said. His eyes were bright. "You already had it. You had it in you the whole time. I just made sure no one could take it from you again." Emma stirred, mumbling something in her sleep. Both of them turned to look at her. The small girl's face was peaceful. Her hand had found Mia's jacket and was holding it like a lifeline. "She asks about you every day," Nicholas said. "Wants to know when you are coming over." "I will come tomorrow," Mia said. "I was hoping you would say that." They sat in comfortable silence while the October wind, now familiar, no longer frightening, rattled the windows like something trying to be let in rather than break through. The city hummed around them. The night stretched forward toward morning. And in that diner, at that table, in that booth where desperation had once sat alone with $5 and no hope, something else now lived. Something that looked like family. Something that looked like home. This is the truth that lives beneath every storm. Sometimes the worst nights lead to the brightest mornings. Sometimes being broken open is the only way to let the light in. Sometimes the person who saves you is the one you saved first, and sometimes that creates a bond that cannot be broken by anything the world can throw at it. Mia Voss was alone at 3 in the morning with $5 and no future, but she had something far more valuable than money. She had the kind of heart that stops for a child in traffic. She had the kind of strength that survives 43 days in a car. She had the kind of courage that keeps going when the world whispers quit. And that heart, that strength, that courage caught the attention of a man who thought he had lost the ability to see goodness. He had been wrong. Your storm will pass. You are far stronger than you think. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to remember their own strength today. Subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done in Mia's place? I read every single one. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We wish you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.